Welcome back to the Nurses Station Show. We're glad to be with you again. As a reminder, you can find us at the nursing.emory.edu and the Nurses Station Show, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can actually join discussions, see our show notes, or check us out on the LinkedIn group page, the Nurses Station Show. With that, we're so glad to be back today for episode 3, talking about nursing school, something we all know really well, maybe a little too well. And first 2 episodes that are posted are really around, we started out introducing ourselves. We talked about what it's like to be nurses, what does it mean to be a nurse? And then we've taken you through some COVID in nursing as well. Guys, I just want to let you know, our producers look at the show afterwards and they examine it. Some people have fact checkers. We have acronym checkers as appropriate. And
goodness.
It's come to our attention. We need to address some things.
What? There's a problem?
I already know who's the guilty party.
Whoa. What is this? What is this problem?
Let's say give you 3 guesses and the first 2 don't count.
Tim.
Right. Tim, you I'm
going to plead the 5th right now. Go ahead.
I'm going to go ahead and read this to you. So you used DPhil as you described your colleague who earned their doctorate overseas.
I said Doctor of Philosophy really fast, and it sounded like DPhil. Thank you.
No, I don't think so. You did say DPhil because I remember not knowing what you were talking about.
Roxanne, I'm going to make you the tiebreaker here. He's guilty.
It's true.
He's guilty.
All right, so I said DPhil. I got excited. He's a brilliant researcher, and I got excited. Okay, fine. I will own that.
Just
I think your score is like 2 now, or 3 or 4, probably.
Like 2. Thank you.
And as I'm coming down on you, I have to fess up. I was the other infraction.
What did you say, Carolyn?
I broke out the ICU on you.
Oh, the ICU, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
ICU counts?
Yeah. We want to recognize and acknowledge our whole audience base and not make any assumptions that as we roll off all these acronyms, like we know what we're talking about, like everyone else knows what we're talking about. We got to be fair across the board, right?
That's right.
I guess, it's just some acronyms just feel like words. You don't even realize it.
Yeah. Lexi, are you breaking a sweat? Because you know you're going to drop some more.
I'm breaking a sweat because I'm like, I need
Remember,
now I have to think about every word that comes out.
At least it's for a good cause, right? So this is how we cover our bar tab at the end of the season. So, be generous. I'm a top shelf.
Really?
Girl.
Yeah, we got it. Hey, can we take a quick pause about the acronyms? I don't know if you remember in the last episode, I talked about one of my mentors, Nurse BB. Now, Nurse BB was that clown nurse that I worked with when I was a clown, and he taught me this song to help me remember my acronyms. And I'd like to share it with you, but only if you don't give me points for this. This is like timeout, no points. I'm not going to lose the game.
Okay, as long as you say time back in when it's time back in, because I don't want to hear that we didn't put the time back in and then you sneak some in.
Well, let's just go ahead and assume time is back on when the song is over. We're not going to.
I'm surrounded by these alpha personalities where we have to have all these rules. Okay, fine. I'm going to say game on. I'm going to sing the song and I'm going to say game off so we know it doesn't count. You ready?
All right, I'm ready.
Acronym song. Here we go. Game on.
Okay.
A, B, C, D, E, K, G, N, P, O on your IV. I see you, you see me. N, P, O, R, N, M, D. Now I sing my alphabet ABCs. Next I'll charge outrageous fees.
That was awesome.
Like
that was beautiful. And you were in tune. That you were in tune.
I was in tune.
No, yes. I was going to call you out on that if you weren't. So good job.
That was amazing. We do medical terminology quizzes for people who are coming into nursing school, or I know pre-nursing programs kind of do that, but I think this should be part of the curriculum.
I agree. And it's got to be in tune, and you got to nail the acronyms.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, game off. Game off, by the way.
Uh-huh.
It can be like a skills check off.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
So, I want rap version. I want a hip hop version of that.
Next episode.
Spice on it.
Next episode.
Yeah. Tim, I want some spice on it next time.
I don't have spice. I can't rap. I can barely hold down a tune, and it's just the alphabet song. That's all I got.
All right.
All I got.
I mean,
Gotcha.
Lexi, if you want the job done right.
I don't even know the song. How we'll work on it.
It's the alphabet song. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Sometimes
we're
you
gonna
take
practice it
matter
off
in
the
your
air
hands.
so I can,
Okay.
give you some bars next time.
All right. I'll dance
Sounds
for it.
good. Oh, save it. Oh, wow.
No, that's not it.
He's not kidding.
No, he does not have rhythm. He has tone, but no rhythm.
For those of you only listening to the podcast, this is maybe the best decision you've made today.
It was pantomime dancing.
Oh yeah, now I'll change it up.
You shake it up.
So in addition to getting busted by our producers, how have you guys been since the last time we spoke? Everybody hanging in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other things pop up around being the real nurse or around, well, let's just start there. Any other sort of things pop up for you all around this notion of what it means to be a nurse? Does that come up in conversation for you?
Well,
Go ahead.
I was actually thinking about Tim, and that. What is your title again, Tim?
My title is Vice President of Practice and Innovation.
What does that mean? What do you?
That's a tricky question. That's a great question. So I wear a lot of hats with the work that I do. One is I'm the head of our professional development for nurses and nursing education. So when nurses come out of Emory Nursing School, other nursing schools, my team works with them in their nurse residency programs to help support them to be great nurses. So that's part of it. The practice and innovation part right now, it's always changing, but right now we're focusing on nurse resilience. And we're focusing on well-being for our caregivers in the face of COVID, and what are innovative ways that we can support our teams and each other. And also we're looking at interprofessionalism. I think, I'm going to be honest, I think it's a little sad that we have to call interprofessionalism innovation. But if you look at healthcare across this country, we're still not communicating the way we should between docs, nurses, technicians. So a big part of my job is how do we build interprofessionalism?
How do you?
That's a really, you've asked me two very challenging questions in the last 30 seconds.
Because I see these really, these fancy titles, and I often wonder, well, what is it that they really do, and how do they do that? Because, so.
No, it's
And
hard.
as a student, I used to always think that too, when speakers would come in to speak, I always wonder, what is it exactly that they do, and how did they get there?
Yeah, one thing I've learned with this title, it's easy to hide behind a title. For one, I think we've experienced that in organizations where we've worked. And the thing I love the most about this title is that I have the opportunity to sit and meet with individual nurses at whatever role they have across the system and the spectrum. And I get to listen to what's going on. And then I get to use my title sometimes to try to help affect systems change for our nurses to support their nurses. So that's great, but it's challenging. And bottom line, communication. It's not easy. Carolyn, I'm sure you've experienced similar things with your role in the nursing school and
Well, I mentioned on a previous episode how the worst question people can ask me is, what do you do? Oh, that's really complicated to get into. And because sometimes we do just really different things depending on the space we're in. It's a wide variety, which is why I love what I do, right? Because I have all these opportunities. But to your point, Tim, in geriatrics, we have a similar conundrum. So we want a lot of people to go in the field of geriatrics, but it can be hard to explain what's different about being a geriatric specialist. And so one of our professional organizations had a Twitter campaign, and someone would take the Twitter feed that day, and it was sort of like a day in the life of a geriatrician or geriatric specialist. And nothing around patient privacy or talking about specifics, but you might come out of a room and say, I just talked to an 89-year-old about no longer driving, and I'm concerned about what that's going to mean for their ability to take care of themselves and stay independent, right? That because those are the things that are going through your mind every day. And I always enjoyed reading it, but I wasn't necessarily the target audience. I'm already in love with geriatrics.
Good.
Yeah, but it's not a bad idea, because it is it's a hard thing to answer. I try not to.
And I change it. Roxana, I think about you and Lexi, I think about the promotion system within nursing academia and titles and how that changes: assistant, associate, full professor, researcher. It's its own sort of alphabet soup.
It is, and there are a lot of different, things you have to achieve to move up within those ranks. So I just find that, I've never been a big title person. I mean, even when I was working in the hospital, the person cleaning the room or the doctor, like I never really got caught up on titles. And I know there are things to aim for, but for me, it's really just about doing what I feel like I'm called to do, and if I do that, and if it results in a promotion, fine. If it doesn't, fine. So far it's been resulting in promotions, but my focus, I guess, is not so much that, I hope to continue to move through, but I just really want to do what I feel like I'm called to do, which is to help people. And so if that means through research or clinical practice or education, I kind of like to go around between all three of those areas. So
yeah, I agree. I think nurses tend to shy away from titles, tend to maybe shy away from sort of self-promotion, certainly. Something that has come up for me, maybe as a surprise, and Tim mentioned this a bit, is what that title sometimes means to people outside of nursing, and how it sometimes opens doors for you to represent probably not just yourself, but maybe your patient population or maybe your professional group, and to advocate on their behalf. Whether we like it or not, to other people, sometimes that really lends some credibility. And you hopefully use that power for good, not evil, right?
Yeah. That's true. That is new to us because we're servants. I think most people that kind of come into our profession, we're there to we want to just help. But you're right, Carolyn, that we need to own it, and it's okay to have those titles and, use that, Tim, as you described, to make things better.
It's the email pool. I got to tell you, I've got folks on my team. I work with this extraordinary team. They're trying to get some communication out, trying to connect with someone to do one thing. No one's responding. And they'll literally come to my office and say, hey, Tim, could you send this email out and just put your signature line at the bottom? Literally, that's all I do. And within a couple of minutes, a response comes back. Like, A, that's super messed up. B, that's also kind of the world that we work in. So like, how do you work with your title? How do you honor it? Like, oh man, I have a lot of mentors who are retired and some have passed away as nurse researchers. And these were, all of them women, driving nurse research at a time when no one believed in nurses to do research. No one believed in nurses to do anything other than care at the bedside. And these women who taught me fought and fought and fought and fought. And in that way, titles carry extra weight, I think, in the nursing profession, because it's also a testament to how we have grown and thrived as a profession when we often find ourselves working in spaces where that question, I mean, you all have heard it before, nurses do research, so it's power.
Yeah. I think it's good to highlight, areas where nurses lead. So we are, a service profession, and we attract people who want to help others, who want to make others' lives better. And that also means that we're the appropriate group or individual to lead. And one of those areas actually has been on our own campus. So I want to transition a bit and talk about COVID-19 and what's been happening on university campuses all over the country. And I have to, of course, begin with our own example of what we're experiencing at Emory, because the nursing program goes year round, which is sort of another thing people don't think about. We can get into that maybe later, but because we go year round and the timing of the surge in cases, when we really started having to respond as a country to the pandemic in these structured and meaningful ways, that was in spring semester, and people sort of finished spring semester, but nursing had to keep going through the summer. And so we had to be the pioneer. And thankfully, we have obviously the science background, and we understand infectious disease and communicable diseases, and had to make some decisions and lead on our own campus around this. But I know not every university is experiencing having a nursing school who get to try things first. And I will say, by the way, we've had wonderful support from the larger university, but we've been, sort of trying things that were new and trying out policies and practices to see if we could do them effectively. And others are now benefiting from that leadership from our school. But you guys have seen the news. It's a crazy time right now. I mean, it's been a crazy year, but around university campuses, including nursing programs, lots of things are happening in terms of their ability to contain infection in and outside of the classroom. I'm curious of the headlines that have maybe caught your attention or the things that have been on your mind recently.
Well, it blows my mind. Go ahead, Lexi.
Well, I was going to say, just yesterday, I mean, I think all this week I've been hearing about college campuses that opened. not particularly nursing schools, but just, college campuses that decided to let students come back, and then within a week or two, having these kind of small outbreaks and then having to send students back home. So I think it's hard, right? Because a lot of these students, maybe it's their first time going to college, and, they just want to go to college. And I think, even though they have policies and procedures in place, like I know Emory has a great, tracking and kind of reporting system. I think a lot of universities have done that. But if you think about it, students are going to college. It's really hard to, hold them to these standards when, college is about socialization and kind of getting to know people. And so I've even read where there are punitive things going on within some of these institutions. And we have to talk about the ethics of that and think about how it affects these students. They're going to get an education, but it's also about the social aspect. And so I think COVID is really making it complicated right now for college campuses and college students.
For sure.
Yeah, I think the classroom is almost the easiest part, right? I mean, we've been transitioning online. We can, if we are physically present, you've seen some innovative ways. If there's space available, we can space people. But outside the classroom seems to be a whole nother animal entirely.
As I reflect on the time that we've had to plan, nursing school keeps going throughout the summer. There's a little less volume with activities around the school, but colleges and universities in general sort of had some summertime to plan what's going to happen when we come back. And I'm reflecting on the spring when COVID first hit. I heard countless stories of students who school ended, they had to go home, they had to move out of their dorms, and countless students who moved to unsafe households. So many students who go to school to get a great education and also to be in a place where they're actually physically and emotionally safe. And that's a big concern that I have in mind. As we open the schools and we bring people back, are we going to have to do another shutdown, last minute shutdown? And are we putting our students at harm by sending them back to dangerous places?
Or a place without the resources that they would have on campus.
Yeah.
So let's say that the space maybe is a safe space, but it's low resourced. And so if you're doing digital learning, that can be really challenging.
Has the university tried to, find out which students are perhaps in need and try to help them kind of fill that gap in a safe way?
There are opportunities for an individual student to sort of put their hand up and say, hey, I need some help here. I have a housing a situation with housing that is not tenable for whatever reason. I doubt that they need to give full disclosure about the details about that, or that they need additional resources. I don't know that any of us were set up to sort of create then those additional spaces. It's almost like these are exceptions. You create policies for the norm or the masses, and then you have exceptions, but the exceptions can really tally up pretty quickly. There are a number of students, and I'm not sure for faculty, certainly, we tend to be really removed from those issues for students. It tends to be more your student services offices, and thank goodness, for them. But I think it's been eye-opening for a number of us, the volume of students who are experiencing these challenges, much more than we would have assumed.
Wow.
Yeah. What do you all think is unique? Let's kind of talk about the nursing school specifically, because I do think nursing school is a little bit different than kind of other specialties. I know for my students, I think one of the biggest challenges is making sure that there's clear and consistent communication. I think right now people are kind of in we have to acknowledge that it's kind of a traumatic time. And so they need to feel more connected. There are also the challenges with the clinicals. How do we exist as a profession? For any students that are watching and they're thinking about nursing school and given the COVID challenges, I don't know, Carolyn or Tim or Roxana, if you have any thoughts on what should they know about our profession right now in nursing school in this time?
I think it's our ability to pivot and really kind of meet the needs. I think we did that in nursing school in March when we pivoted and have put in all these things into place to try to support all the students, and simulation and looking into how we can provide the best education experience, even though it's different, right? When you're not there with a patient. But I think that we are doing a good job, and perhaps, this is a good learning opportunity for all of us on how to use telehealth, telemedicine in a better way than before.
Mm-hmm. No, it certainly has been. I think the concern for students, and this is a concern for practicing nurses as well, is their own exposure. So for someone who's completed their nursing education, who's in practice, who is pretty adept at donning and doffing their personal protective equipment. I was this close to saying PPE.
Oh, nice catch.
Oh,
You should get negative points for that. We should take one away.
They're comfortable doing it. They know the order of operations. They know, they're feeling confident in their hand hygiene. Even practicing nurses have concerns about contracting the illness themselves, about bringing it home to their families, and they have education and experience. So for a student who maybe has prerequisites in science, they maybe have had some nursing courses, but their level of comfort is nothing close to what the practicing nurses are. I think they're feeling even more uncertainty. So it is a lot about communication, Roxana, having to communicate with them what's going on, ongoing. I think we've been fortunate to have amazing expertise at Emory in infectious disease who talk with us and who track our numbers so we can be transparent about our own professionals and what our rates are for staff, and if they have contracted the illness, where we think that has happened, and when that typically is outside of work as opposed to in work. But Tim, I'm sure you have nurses who are feeling uncertain themselves, and then they're trying to precept a nursing student, and I get their concern.
Exactly. And this makes me reflect on my own nursing school experience. When I was in nursing school, we had our clinical rotations. We would go to different units, the ICU, CCU, MICU, all of that stuff. And then
That's
Called
three.
it. Yep.
3.
Ooh, let me get a pen. Hold on.
Wait. We're not recording.
I'm sorry, wait.
Nope. That was 3.
Back.
Okay, wait.
Where do they go again?
Oh.
I'm not familiar.
Look at my sticky note.
You can put that away. I know. They went to the cardiac care unit, the intensive care unit, and the medical intensive care unit.
Right.
I love you all. Anyways, in nursing school, we would have these rotations on these different units. And as a student, we had preceptors, and we would be guided, mentored by these preceptors. And I remember as a student, I felt a deep sense of calm, even though I was anxious, but my preceptors knew what they were doing, and I trusted them. And I felt like there was kind of a regular flow to the workflow of the unit. I come in, go out, this is the way things go. And as a student, I didn't realize how in flux so many elements of a nursing unit are. I mean, you've got staffing concerns, you've got budgetary concerns, you've got supply concerns. All these things have always been swirling around, but as a student, I didn't see that. And I think about our students and our learners right now in the time of COVID. And I think about our nurse managers. My heart goes out to them because they want to bring the students on the unit to do their clinicals so they can get that hands-on experience. And at the same time, there's so much flux with patient volumes. We have a no visitor policy in many of our units because it's too safe. We don't have enough PPE. We don't have enough personal perspective. Whose idea was it for this dumb game?
That's okay. Just keep going. You're doing a great job.
You're not taking
Great.
You're not, we don't have enough personal protective equipment necessarily to support our nurses, our doctors, and our students. So there are all these variables. And going back to Roxana's point about pivoting, I think one thing we've learned with the nursing school, with the health system, with our students, is our students are learning firsthand how to pivot, which I didn't have to learn in nursing school because I thought it was a lot more sort of copacetic, straight and narrow, balanced. Being so out of balance, I hope that we're mentoring our students to actually strengthen their clinical practice by saying, this is the reality, here's how we roll with it.
We've
Talk
said
about
for a
learning
while.
how to adapt.
Right.
Yes.
Well, we've said for a while, nursing school is no longer about memorizing facts. You can look up any of that information with the machine in your pocket. It's about learning to think. It's about learning to think critically, to think on your feet, and to adapt. And so it might be that what they're learning in that environment is exactly what we had hoped for. Maybe not. This is probably not the way we had hoped they would have to learn those skills.
But historically, if you think about nursing schools, they were hospital based. And I think one of you mentioned on the last episode back in 1918, when they had the nursing students there, they just had to kick in and kind of learn. So I think in some ways it's like history is repeating itself a little bit, and it might be time for nursing to really think about how we educate, and maybe that element of pressure and that element of realness is really needed to help people understand the concept of critical thinking.
Yes.
You know, so I think in some ways, you know, you always look at COVID and how the good and the bad, but I think in a good way, it may be good to kind of recalibrate and kind of look at teaching in that same way.
Definitely. And the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, or the AACN, has put out a working paper saying we need to reconfigure the way we bring nursing students on board into units, reflecting on the model that you mentioned, Lexi, back in 1918. So this is a great learning opportunity. It's just challenging that it's in the face of so much suffering.
Yeah, we've been moving away from the diploma model toward the university model as nursing education has evolved. But we have to recognize the good things that were in that hospital-based nursing program world. So even though we're in the university model fully at this point, we have to recognize that a nursing student is not experiencing the typical college student experience because they have this clinical environment that they're going to at least weekly. So they're also still getting testing and retesting, just like the staff are, if they're going to be in those settings. If they have an exposure and it's confirmed, so maybe they've been exposed to a patient who turns out to be COVID positive and they were in the room during procedures, not wearing that level of personal protective equipment, then they're also quarantined and isolated, which is challenging for anyone for all kinds of reasons. For a nursing student, it may be the difference of whether or not they're able to finish their program on time because they just stepped out for 2 entire weeks of something like a clinical rotation. So I think we have to acknowledge for them, they're college students and they're nursing students. They're sort of in bridging both worlds. Our students have done something really cool though, unique to their experience as a student and being part of this healthcare world as we've been bringing back people to campus this fall. And that is that as people have come to campus, students have returned to campus, certain students, certain staff have come back to campus. We've committed to doing COVID testing for each of them with rapid testing. We're doing that through one of our urgent care partners as a part of the Emory Healthcare Network, but they needed to do something like 1,000 tests a day.
Wow.
And it turns out that our nursing students have been doing a significant part of the staffing for that testing as we've been bringing people back. And so, you know, without those students doing that service to the university, but also learning a lot about what happens, how you stand up mass testing, how you do the procedure, how you give someone results, which can be really pretty significant, or how you at least participate in giving results. They've learned all of this, but they've also helped us open campus. So it's been, I think, a really neat opportunity. And, you know, we've been able to obviously provide them with all of the protective equipment that they need to stay safe while we did it.
That's great. And, you know, when you think about the test, I'm guessing most people in this audience have been tested at least once for COVID by this point. It's uncomfortable to be tested, and it's not the easiest thing to do. So the fact that our students are learning this, you know, when I was in nursing school, procedures we would practice in the lab, and some we never did until we were practicing nurses. We had our license, right? So that our students are learning this now. There's also a lot. You don't swab enough, you're not going to get a good enough test, and you're not going to have accurate results. So this is life-changing and life-saving work. And so it's really inspiring that our nurses are learning that and doing it well. Next time you get your nose and brain poked for the COVID test, don't take for granted that it's an easy thing to do. Like, there is a skill to it, and it's critical.
You know, we call it the brain swap in my family. If you don't tear up, it's not in far enough. So speaking of nursing school experiences, I mean, all of this discussion around what students are doing and what they're experiencing, we can't help but think about our own nursing education experiences. And I know we did introductions a little bit about ourselves in previous episodes, but what I want us to share first as we think about that is our education pathways. So this is similar to what do you do with that title? There's also the question of, and how did you get there? And it's not entirely about your education, but a big piece of it is. Roxanne, I wonder if you would start by telling us a little bit about your pathway and degrees.
Yeah, so, well, okay. I feel like nursing picked me, not that I picked nursing. So I worked at a pediatrician's office with some pediatric nephrologists. And so I started translating or interpreting for a lot of the Spanish-speaking patients. And that's when I was told that I could be a nurse. And I thought, oh, maybe I can be a nurse. So I went and got my associate's degree first. And while I was in my associate's program, Emory University visited the community college with a program called the Bridge to the Baccalaureate. And they introduced me to research and bachelorette, getting a bachelor's of nursing. And so then I transitioned to the School of Nursing at Emory University and got a bachelor's in 2 semesters and had a baby in between spring and summer semester. And then I figured that I just needed to power through the summer semester. So I only took a week off. And I had a C-section, and I didn't tell my teachers that I had a C-section because I needed to go to clinical, and I didn't want them to like not let me lift if I needed to lift because I just felt like I needed to power through. So I got through summer, and 2 weeks later, I started the PhD program at Emory University and just finished it this past May. So it just went straight through.
Wow.
Nonstop.
Wow. And
it was fun.
And are you in any education programs now, or I know you're conducting research. We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm a postdoctoral fellow doing research. I'm actually in the field still in Florida doing research with agricultural workers. And so I'm doing that, and I get to teach a little bit of population health. So I'm just continuing on this comet to wherever it takes me.
I love it. Yeah, I remember the first time someone realized there was another education program after a doctorate. Like, I thought, how can this be?
Oh, I love it. I tell my mentors, especially the dean, don't cut the umbilical cord. I'm happy to stay here. Like, I truly enjoyed being a PhD student. It was really fun and encouraging.
Absolutely. I'm glad it was a good experience. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Tim, don't tell us about a DPhil, but what's your education pathway?
my education pathway. So I majored in English in undergrad, got a bachelor's in English, and I worked not nursing for about 7 years and then was inspired to become a nurse. So I went back into school and did what we call a second degree program. My program, I got a master's in nursing, an MSN, as well as a clinical nurse leader, or a CNL. So I did the CNL/MSN program. And then I went right in. And to be honest, I was not interested in leadership. I was interested in a second degree program that I could take my bachelor's that I'd gotten and jump head forward and not have to go back and get a bachelor's in nursing. So I love the second degree programs. And then about 7 years in working full time, I wanted to learn more. And so I got my doctorate in public health. It's a DRPH because I was interested in resilience, global health, and nursing offered some aspects of that. But I thought for me, public health was a little broader and I wasn't quite sure my direction. So I wanted to have a sort of a broader grasp of that. So MSN, DRPH, I think those are some of the letters behind my name. And I was grateful to be able to practice clinically while I was doing my doctoral work. There was a lot of open time for that. So I'd work nights and then go to class during the day. Didn't have a baby. Roxana, that is amazing. Like, nurses are also superheroes with what they are able to do. And like, that is so inspiring and mind blowing.
Yeah, it's great to have a baby while you're in school. I think it's a great idea because especially like in the PhD program, because in the beginning, all they do is sleep, eat. So I would put her
Your
on
professors or the baby?
The baby.
Oh, the baby.
I mean, the baby.
Hey.
All they do.
Hey.
You know, like she didn't even know that I was spending so many hours like on my laptop. So I encourage everyone who wants to have a baby and is like thinking like, can I do this or not? You can. And you actually do better, I think.
What I always tell people is there's never a good time to have a baby. I mean, have it. There's no perfect time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Lexi, speaking of having babies. Midwife.
I know, in the spirit of midwifery, I'll keep it quick because I know we got more things we want to talk about. But I'm traditional nursing. All my degrees have been nursing, bachelor's, undergraduate, master's degree, midwifery, and doctorate, the PhD. So a very traditional pathway. I kind of want to share more about some of my experiences briefly, especially my undergraduate. So in nursing school, you know, just like the nursing students now are experiencing all this COVID and kind of challenges, I would like to say that when I went to nursing school, there was no pandemic or anything crazy like that going on, but we were still dealing with some diversity issues within my school. And a friend of mine and I decided to start a diversity organization. This was back before it was all popular to do it. And it was not, for us, we thought it was exciting because we were trying to build something to increase the matriculation of certain groups and populations that we saw weren't present in the nursing school, but it wasn't necessarily well received. I remember one professor in particular, asked us to meet with them, and they were kind of appalled that we would think of starting an organization like that, because I guess for them, it suggested that, I don't know, it triggered something in her for her to say out loud to us that, she was offended by it. So I would like to say to anyone that's considering nursing, if, you're a true leader, sometimes, you come into programs, you might have a vision and it may not always be well received, but you just have to follow your heart and what you feel like is right. And that's something I learned very early on in my nursing program. And also I had very good positive experiences. I don't want to just overshadow that, but another thing was there were very few people of color in my cohort. I think there were maybe 3 of us out of 120. But our cohort was the first time in a long time they had African-American students that were excelling. So I remember actually being sat down by professors to ask me, so what is it that you're doing to make A's in the classes? And I remember looking like, I study. I mean, it was so odd. And so, some of those things are things that I learned early on that this profession still has a ways to go with, trying to increase the diversity. We need to reflect more of the population we take care of. And so I think when we talk to our invited guests today later about, what are some things that nursing schools are doing, I think diversity is definitely one of those things that has always been near and dear to my heart, and something I would like to see nursing schools do a better job with, making sure that the student population and the professors and staff and everybody reflects the population of people that we're going to care for. So that's kind of in a blurb, my nursing school experience.
Great reflections, Lexi. I'm like you, very traditional. I started nursing school at 17, graduated at 21. My first patients used to ask me if my mother drove me to work. And then, and I did back then what was considered the requisite 2 years of nursing practice in that intensive care unit. And then I got to really start the master's program and focus on gerontology, which is what I wanted to do all along. I really just wanted to take care of older people, and nursing seemed like a rational way that I knew I could get a job doing that.
I have a question, Carolyn. Okay, so this, you said this traditional that you went into 2 years into practice and then you went and got your master's. What is the thought now? Like, what do you think about, should you do that, or should you go straight through? Because I've heard this before, where if you don't take that break to go and practice, you're not going to learn the skills and you're not going to be like a real nurse. And will you be able to actually provide quality care to patients as a nurse practitioner if you don't have those 2 years of practice under your belt?
Yeah. No, I think we're definitely going to talk about that today. That is like on my list, for sure. I have, back then it was, I could hardly find a master's program or a nurse practitioner program that would accept me if I didn't have that experience, or maybe they sort of said that they would, but I got some real mixed messages when I would talk to people at like career fairs or school fairs, at like the National Student Nurses Association, those kinds of things. So just quickly, I'll just tell you. So my next degrees are in nursing. Postgrad certificates are in nursing education. My doctor of nursing practice, which we've talked about before. And I also did a postdoctoral fellowship at the Department of Veterans Affairs in their geriatrics research education and clinical center. So that is absolutely one of those trends that we're seeing, is that direct entry, getting to the terminal degree more quickly versus leaving school, working for a while and saying, someday I'm going to go back to school, because someday doesn't come. And there are a lot of reasons that we want to get people at that at their terminal degree earlier so that they can do that for longer. And I think that's a perfect segue actually to introduce our guest who's with us today. We have Jasmine Hoffman joining us from the School of Nursing, one of my Associate Dean colleagues. She has a long Associate Dean title as well, so I'll ask her to introduce herself briefly. Jasmine, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. So I am an Associate Dean and Chief Operating Officer in the School of Nursing. And in my role, I oversee several functional areas, primarily admissions, student affairs, HR, IT, and operations. So I get to have a 360-degree view of everything that's happening in the School of Nursing at any given time. And the most important part of my day is making sure that our students have an incredible experience. And so part of that, my role is making sure that we know exactly what is happening in the nursing school landscape at all times. So we do a lot of poll watching, a lot of viewership of data, and engaging with other nursing school leaders to have our fingers on the pulse of what's impacting nursing students today, not only in Georgia, but all across the nation.
So Roxana had that wonderful question, which I know has come up for us for a long time around admissions. I think a lot of people interested in maybe becoming a nurse midwife, for example, or who want to do nursing science, want to know, what's the pathway? How long do I need to wait? Do you have an experience requirement? And, Emory is an innovative place. Innovation is one of our core values. So we like to keep up with what's happening out there. And I would say that we are more, I think, on the edge of what's coming. But what is the trend that you're seeing around more people doing what we call direct entry?
We are seeing direct entry programs skyrocket nationally. So many students today are deciding to go into a nurse practitioner program without any experience as registered nurses. What is also interesting about nursing as a discipline compared to other majors at colleges and universities is that nursing has a high proportion of its student population who are coming from previous careers. So we call those second degree students. Those are students who have a bachelor's degree in another discipline, whether that be marketing, engineering, biology, who get into the workforce and they find that nursing is their calling and they go back to nursing school later in life, or sometimes after 1 or 2 years of experience. And so those cohorts are pretty amazing because they're diverse in their skill sets. They have just so much to bring to the table. And a lot of those students who are coming from previous degrees do decide to go straight into a nurse practitioner program. They don't want to waste any time to get into their chosen career field. So they're trying to explore accelerated programs where there are no breaks and they can get a fast track to the careers that they want.
Tim, that's closer to your pathway, it sounds like.
Absolutely, the second degree pathway. And Jasmine, I'm interested, you mentioned the diversity of experience. In my previous job before I came to Emory, I taught at another university and I taught in a second degree program. It was actually the one that I had trained in. And I loved working with those students because I had a massive age range of students, massive diversity of professional experience. My question for you is, do you see more diversity, ethnic diversity, racial diversity in your second degree students as compared to your traditional undergrad students? And if so, what is that about, do you think?
That's a great question. So we see an excessive amount of diversity in every way you slice it with our second degree programs. So their career paths and career fields prior to entering nursing school are incredibly diverse. We see a lot of geographical diversity in our second degree programs. So not regional. These are students who want to get into the workforce and they're willing to be geographically flexible to choose the programs that they want to move forward. We see people at different life stages. So you have everything from students who are 22 and 23 who graduate 1 week and then start nursing school with a different degree program the next week. And then you have people who are having children who are later in life in their 50s and really reevaluating what they want to do before they retire. So we see a lot of diversity. And with that, we see a lot of ethnic diversity as well. We are seeing higher proportions of both students from underrepresented minorities minority groups, as well as more men. We have higher percentages of men in the second degree programs than any other tracks. So there's a wealth of diversity, and it's really exciting to see that.
That's great, Jasmine. I mean, in talking about that, I mean, the diversity, are you seeing any trends as far as we've been talking a lot about COVID on this episode. Are you seeing any unique trends in nursing programs across the country related to COVID, and how those might intersect with diversity, or just kind of what are the current trends that you're seeing?
So today is a very interesting time in nursing school history. There has never been more interest nationally in the nursing field than ever before. So I actually compare this to September 11th. So if we think about September 11th, what we saw in that landscape was that people wanted to support the American cause. And we saw military enlistments skyrocket during that time frame. We are seeing the same trends in nursing school. We are seeing people respond to the pandemic and say, I want to be a part of the healthcare workforce. I want to be a part of change and improving healthcare delivery in every way possible. So we are seeing applications skyrocket. And I think you're seeing this in every type of program, both traditional, second degree, graduate programs, and doctoral programs. And that creates an interesting challenge. So prior to COVID, and for the last 20 years, nursing schools have not been able to admit all of the qualified students that we have because there aren't enough seats, there aren't enough clinical placements, and there aren't enough faculty to teach them. We have been in the midst of a nursing faculty shortage for a very long time. And so as applications increase due to COVID-19, there are going to be fewer seats for students. And so we will be turning away hundreds of thousands of qualified students because they don't have the resources. Nursing schools don't have the resources to teach them. But it's an amazing time in nursing school for that reason, is that the demand is incredible at this moment in history.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. So we've talked a little bit about direct entry and how much of our student population is second degree. And I would just say it is, as somebody who is a traditional first career nursing, what a wonderful addition to the profession to work alongside people with these different backgrounds as practicing nurses, not just in the school. We talked a little bit about sort of the fast track or getting people into the doctorate program of their choice sooner rather than waiting for a bit. One thing we haven't touched on, and I think it addresses this issue that you're mentioning, Jasmine, where there's a need for nurses, but we're limited by some of our structural pieces, including seats in the classroom, even before we were physically distancing, and also clinical placements. And that is something that is new that we're offering at Emory, and that's the distance second degree nursing program, or accelerated bachelor's of science. DABSN for the acronym, but I spelled it out first.
Okay, yes, thank you for spelling it out first.
So you're safe, Jasmine, you can say it.
So we are seeing with distance programs that they are having incredible growth everywhere. So it's one of our most competitive programs here at Emory with about a 10% acceptance rate. The demand is incredibly high.
Yeah. You're surprised, Roxana?
Yeah. I'm just, how do the distance learning students fulfill their clinicals? If they live like another state and
Yes. So our distance accelerated BSN students actually fulfill their clinical rotations in their hometowns. They do travel back to Atlanta for clinical immersion experiences at Emory Healthcare, but they are doing majority of their clinical learning in their hometowns. And many of those are in rural areas like Alaska or in South Dakota, where there is a major need for nurses. So we're trying to fulfill a gap that exists in our healthcare system, getting more nurses into primary care. And we're seeing that the marketplace is responding. There are very few programs nationally that offer this type of model. There are less than 5, but we do know that there are institutions institutions that are exploring ways to launch these types of programs, which are likely on hold due to COVID-19. So the marketplace is changing every day, and COVID-19 is having an impact on what new programs are going to be entering the marketplace to support the students who are interested in nursing right now.
So Jasmine, what I'm hearing then is that you're innovating at two levels with this work. We are one, filling seats, virtual seats in classrooms, which could be more or less almost unlimited based on the technology that we work with. And at the same time, you're keeping nurses in their communities to support local communities and population health, feeding two birds with one dish. That's amazing. I mean, that's really awesome.
It's been really powerful to watch when you look at how nursing schools and colleges and institutions had to transform their operations in light of COVID, how the distance accelerated BSN program just continued its operations as normal. They had very little disruption. Some travel plans had to change due to the clinical immersion experiences, but for the most part, they were functional through this entire process.
Okay, I just wanted to know if the distance learning students are more diverse or equally diverse or less diverse than the traditional nursing students.
They are actually equally diverse. It's been interesting to watch the trends, but they are equally diverse. I would actually say we have more parents and people in different life stages in our distance program, but they're spread out geographically. So we see very similar demographics in the distance ABSN program as we do in other tracks. Socioeconomically, there are differences with those tracks because we're recruiting from rural areas. So the dynamics between students coming from rural areas versus urban areas is very different. So we're seeing a lot of different trends. It's still a young program, so we're still trying to establish some baselines with how the distance accelerated BSN program is different from other tracks at Emory University.
Jasmine, I can't thank you enough. When we started thinking about nursing education trends, I don't know anyone who has their finger on the pulse more than you do around what's happening, not just locally at Emory, but across the country. So thank you so much for taking the time with us today. It's been tremendously helpful. And I'm sure helpful to people listening.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jasmine. It's great.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
And for those of you listening, we'd love to see you at Emory. We hope that works out, or another nursing program close to you or of your choice. We do welcome your feedback. You can engage with us, remember, on the LinkedIn show page at the Nurses Station Show, and we'll look at questions there and get to you when we can. If we can, you'll see us on a couple of social channels, or you can always look at the website, which is nursing.emory.edu/the Nurses Station. Until the next episode, we hope you stay well.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.